For decades, audiences have assumed that the tools behind filmmaking, from lighting to sound design, are simply artistic instruments meant to shape mood and narrative. But hidden in the margins of Hollywood's technical history is another story, one where certain directors pushed their craft so far into untested sensory territory that the industry quietly stepped back. Long before digital precision smoothed the edges of modern cinema, filmmakers experimented with volatile blends of analog light pulses, experimental audio frequencies, and distorted motion techniques that reached deeper into human perception than anyone anticipated. Some of these methods were subtle enough that viewers never realized what affected them. Small disruptions in rhythm, low vibrations built into sound beds, or visual patterns that danced at the thresholds of detection. Yet the body reacted anyway. Reports from premiere screenings described dizziness, inexplicable waves of unease, or the feeling that the film was exerting pressure rather than simply being watched. These reactions were rarely publicized. Studios preferred to avoid scrutiny, especially when no clear explanation existed beyond "the audience responded strangely." Each time a technique caused concern, the pattern repeated. A film debuted, viewers felt something they couldn't articulate. Executives held closed-door discussions, and the method disappeared, not with a public announcement but with silent avoidance. Over time, these vanished experiments formed a hidden chapter of sci-fi history, one defined not by creative failure but by techniques deemed too psychologically potent to use again. In this episode, we revisit 15 films born from that forgotten frontier. Some manipulated light in ways that overwhelmed the eye. Others used sound to engage the nervous system directly. A few blurred the line between cinematic illusion and sensory interference. All revealed what happens when storytelling intersects with the raw mechanics of human perception. And their disappearance leaves a lingering question. Did Hollywood abandon these techniques for safety or because they worked too well? Fact 1. Die Hard. When Die Hard stormed theaters in 1988, audiences were captivated by the sight of a lone cop confronting terrorists in a Los Angeles skyscraper. Behind the spectacular explosions and intense stunts, however, the film teetered on the edge of a major legal crisis. The movie was adapted from Roderick Thorpe's novel Nothing Lasts Forever, but early script drafts diverged so drastically from the source material that the author's representatives prepared for a potential copyright claim. Key plot points were altered, character arcs were rewritten, and entirely new sequences were inserted, raising serious questions about fidelity to the original work. Additionally, the filmmakers used a real building, the Nakatomi Plaza, which led to disputes over whether its depiction as a target of a terrorist attack might harm the property's reputation. Even more precarious was the reaction from a real-life counter-terrorism agency, which argued that the film's villains closely mirrored operational profiles they had developed. The implications were staggering, suggesting that classified or sensitive information might have been inadvertently incorporated into the script. Studio attorneys worked feverishly to renegotiate agreements and protect the production, while writers were instructed to revise antagonist details, including background stories and accents, to deflect potential legal exposure. Documents known internally as the redacted binder were reviewed and then destroyed, ensuring no trace of the early script variations remained. Ultimately, Die Hard became a defining action classic, yet its success was safeguarded not just by brilliant direction and acting, but by a legal team working in the shadows. Without their intervention, the film might have faced litigation capable of halting its release, proving that some of the greatest explosions on screen were mirrored by equally tense battles off-screen. Fact 2. The Terminator. When James Cameron's The Terminator premiered in 1984, it instantly redefined the science fiction action genre. However, the film quickly drew accusations of plagiarism from multiple writers who claimed that the story of a time-traveling assassin closely mirrored unpublished scripts or television episodes they had created years earlier. One prominent television creator contended that the antagonist's relentless pursuit of the protagonist, combined with narrative elements and thematic beats, had been lifted from his work. The studio initially dismissed these claims, arguing that similar ideas were common within the genre, yet the potential for a high-profile lawsuit loomed. The legal threat was amplified when an independent sci-fi author alleged that Cameron had access to his manuscript during a pitch meeting and incorporated crucial elements. including the unstoppable robotic assassin. The claim implied that studio insiders might have used his work without authorization, creating a significant intellectual property dispute. To prevent escalation, the studio negotiated a confidential settlement, providing financial compensation and granting retroactive, inspired by, credit on subsequent releases. Non-disclosure agreements ensured that details of the settlement remained private, and the matter was quietly removed from public discussion. Through careful negotiation and legal maneuvering, the Terminator survived potential litigation, allowing it to achieve cult status. The public enjoyed a groundbreaking story without knowing how close the project had come to being derailed by lawsuits over concept ownership and creative rights. Fact 3. Speed. Speed, released in 1994, is remembered for its relentless bus chase and gripping suspense. Yet, behind the scenes, it faced a significant legal threat that could have prevented its release. A writer claimed that the plot, revolving around a bomb-rigged bus and a hero racing against time, closely resembled a script he had submitted to agencies years earlier. He alleged that several sequences, including specific tension-building scenes and character interactions, were adapted without his permission. Simultaneously, a Japanese studio raised concerns that the movie borrowed ideas from a 1985 action film involving a similarly rigged vehicle, claiming unauthorized adaptation of their concept. Studio attorneys conducted a rapid internal review to assess exposure, discovering that a junior development assistant had indeed reviewed the independent writer's script. Fearing that litigation could halt distribution or result in substantial damages, the studio offered a settlement, including financial compensation and strict confidentiality agreements. Additionally, production teams made minor edits and reshot certain scenes to create enough divergence from prior works, ensuring that the final product could be defended against claims of copyright infringement. Despite these behind-the-scenes crises, Speed was released as planned and became a major box office success. The film's survival was secured by a combination of legal diligence, strategic settlements, and careful editing, illustrating that blockbuster thrills are often matched by equally high-stakes legal challenges off-camera. Fact 4. Predator. Predator, released in 1987, became an iconic blend of jungle warfare and extraterrestrial menace, yet the film's production nearly collided with legal challenges rooted in intellectual property claims. Two unrecognized writers argued that the film's premise, a group of soldiers hunted by an invisible, technologically superior creature, closely mirrored a script they had submitted to studios in the late 1970 seconds. The similarities included narrative beats, tension sequences, and the creature's design. The studio initially ignored the complaints, but when it was discovered that one of the producers had received their draft years earlier, the risk of a copyright lawsuit escalated dramatically. Studio executives convened a confidential investigation to determine the extent of potential exposure. Internal emails and memos were scrutinized to trace whether any creative personnel had access to the earlier script. Facing the possibility of an injunction or forced acknowledgement, the studio reached a secret settlement with the writers, providing compensation and strict non-disclosure agreements. The agreement ensured the authors would not publicly discuss their claims, effectively silencing them and preventing negative publicity from reaching the general audience. Behind the visual spectacle and relentless action sequences, Predator's survival hinged on these discreet legal maneuvers. Without the settlement, the film could have faced costly litigation, potentially delaying its release or requiring substantial creative adjustments, proving that the greatest threat sometimes lies not in the jungle, but in the boardroom. Fact 5. The Bourne Identity. The Bourne Identity, which debuted in 2002, faced legal scrutiny over the use of techniques and scenarios allegedly derived from confidential operational methods. A former intelligence contractor claimed that several espionage tactics depicted in the film, including surveillance routines, escape strategies, and psychological conditioning programs, closely resembled material he had developed for covert operations. His allegations suggested that filmmakers had accessed sensitive information, potentially breaching security and intellectual property rights. Studio lawyers acted swiftly, analyzing the script, consulting technical advisors, and evaluating whether any unauthorized materials had been incorporated. While no definitive evidence linked the writers to the contractor's work, minor revisions were made to the script. changing terminology, and adjusting operational sequences to reduce legal exposure. Behind the scenes, negotiations were conducted privately, culminating in a settlement that included confidentiality clauses, preventing any public disclosure of the dispute. The legal threat underscored the thin line between cinematic realism and proprietary information. By resolving the issue discreetly, the studio safeguarded the film's release and maintained its narrative integrity, demonstrating how legal considerations can shape the creation and final presentation of blockbuster action films. Fact 6. Lethal Weapon 2. Lethal Weapon 2, released in 1989, quickly became a cultural phenomenon, yet its depiction of South African diplomats operating with immunity sparked legal and diplomatic concerns. Individuals portrayed indirectly claimed that their likenesses were used without consent, and advocacy groups threatened defamation claims. Additionally, a South African writer alleged that elements of the film had been taken from his unpublished manuscript, which described similar diplomatic interference and criminal activity. To address these threats, the studio engaged in confidential negotiations with the affected parties. Settlements included undisclosed payments, adjustments to international releases, and assurances that public commentary regarding the disputes would remain limited. Legal teams also coordinated with government representatives to prevent any formal diplomatic escalation, ensuring the film could be distributed worldwide without interruption. These efforts illustrate that blockbuster action films often face challenges beyond production, including complex legal and political considerations. Lethal Weapon 2's release and success relied not only on creative storytelling and on-screen charisma, but also on the careful management of potential lawsuits and sensitive international issues, highlighting the unseen forces shaping Hollywood's most celebrated films. Fact 7. True Lies. True Lies, released in 1994, combined high-octane action with espionage and domestic comedy, yet it also triggered serious legal disputes concerning cultural representation. A Middle Eastern community in California claimed that the film's portrayal of a terrorist organization mirrored real activists, asserting that certain characters, including their behaviors, appearance, and dialogue, directly referenced identifiable individuals. Their attorney threatened a defamation lawsuit, citing the risks of associating a real-life community with criminal behavior. The studio initially attempted to dismiss the complaint, arguing that the characters were fictional composites. However, internal review revealed that one of the film's research consultants had attended public lectures by the activist in question, recognizing the potential for a costly legal battle. The studio negotiated a confidential settlement that included financial compensation and strict non-disclosure clauses. In addition, minor post-production adjustments were made to dialogue and promotional materials to further reduce the risk of identification. Despite the legal pressure, True Lies successfully premiered and became a blockbuster hit. Behind the thrilling stunts and comedic sequences, the studio had to navigate a delicate landscape of cultural sensitivity and potential litigation, ensuring that the final product could reach audiences without exposing itself to public legal challenges. Fact 8. The Rock. The Rock, released in 1996, featured an explosive plot involving rogue Marines and chemical weapons on Alcatraz Island, but off-screen, the film faced serious legal scrutiny. A former military chemist claimed that the depiction of VX nerve gas, emergency procedures, and containment techniques closely resembled sensitive protocols he had developed. The claim suggested that confidential information had been used without authorization, raising the stakes to potential national security implications. Studio executives acted swiftly, consulting legal experts and government officials to evaluate the validity of the claims. While the Pentagon publicly downplayed the situation, internal measures included revising technical sequences in the film, altering terminology, and quietly negotiating with the chemist to reach a settlement. Confidential agreements were signed, preventing the details from becoming public and ensuring no classified information would be disclosed. Through these discreet actions, the studio safeguarded both the film's release and its reputation. The Rock demonstrates how action films often balance spectacular on-screen visuals with careful management of legal, ethical, and security risks behind the scenes. Fact 9. Point Break. Point Break, released in 1991, blended adrenaline-fueled surfing sequences with crime thriller elements, but the production faced multiple legal threats. A former FBI trainee alleged that the film used techniques and operational details from his training materials, including undercover procedures and procedural protocols. Simultaneously, professional surfers and community groups contended that the depiction of surfing subcultures as criminal enterprises was defamatory, claiming that the film harmed their reputation and livelihood. To mitigate these risks, the studio engaged in confidential settlements, including financial compensation and non-disclosure agreements for all parties involved. International cuts of the film were edited to reduce potential misrepresentation of the surfing community. Additionally, internal memos and consultant statements were reviewed to ensure no further unauthorized material had influenced the production. Despite these challenges, Point Break achieved commercial and critical success. Its journey illustrates that action films often navigate a hidden layer of legal and ethical complexities, with the studio's careful interventions behind the scenes ensuring that audiences experienced only the intended thrill without exposure to litigation risks. Fact 10. The Matrix. The Matrix, released in 1999, redefined action and science fiction cinema, but it also became the center of an authorship dispute that threatened to derail the film's reputation. An independent writer claimed that key concepts in the film, including a simulated reality controlled by machines and the protagonist's journey of awakening, closely mirrored elements in her unpublished manuscript circulated to studios years earlier. While there was no direct proof that the filmmakers had seen her work, the existence of internal coverage notes referencing her manuscript created potential legal exposure. The studio's legal team conducted an exhaustive review, tracing communications, script drafts, and development notes to demonstrate independent creation. Despite these efforts, the risk of a lawsuit and negative publicity required a discreet settlement, ensuring that the writer received compensation while agreeing to strict non-disclosure clauses. Additionally, minor adjustments were made to ancillary materials in the franchise, including extended universe content, to further distinguish the film from any external sources. Through these behind-the-scenes negotiations, The Matrix was able to achieve critical acclaim and blockbuster success without public litigation, highlighting the delicate balance studios maintain between creativity and intellectual property protection. Fact 11. Top Gun. Top Gun, released in 1986, soared to fame with aerial action sequences and charismatic performances, but it faced significant legal scrutiny regarding real-life inspiration. The family of a deceased naval aviator claimed that Maverick's character mirrored their relative's personality and career, while a journalist alleged that the film incorporated specific anecdotes, slang, and operational details from confidential interviews he conducted. The combination of personal likeness claims and potential breaches of privacy created a high-risk legal environment for the studio. To address these threats, studio lawyers and military representatives collaborated to negotiate discreet settlements with the family and journalist. Non-disclosure agreements prevented public discussion of the disputes, while select script and promotional materials were adjusted to mitigate likeness and privacy issues. These measures ensured that Top Gun could be released internationally without risking litigation or diplomatic complications. The film's enduring popularity demonstrates how studios manage complex, real-world influences behind the scenes, protecting both the legal interests of individuals and the commercial potential of their productions. Fact 12. Bad Boys 2. Bad Boys 2, released in 2003, delivered explosive action and high-speed chases, yet the production faced multiple legal challenges. Residents of Miami filed complaints regarding property damage caused during location shoots, while a group of independent filmmakers accused the studio of appropriating elements from a previous action project, particularly highway chase sequences and character dynamics. These overlapping claims raise the possibility of litigation that could delay the film's release and damage its reputation. To mitigate these risks, the studio negotiated settlements, compensating affected residents and independent filmmakers while ensuring strict non-disclosure agreements were in place. Certain scenes were modified to distinguish them from prior works, and legal teams reviewed all documentation to prevent further claims. The combined approach allowed the film to premiere as scheduled, maintaining its narrative and visual impact while avoiding costly public disputes. Bad Boys 2 exemplifies the unseen legal work that underpins blockbuster action films, demonstrating that what audiences experience on screen is often matched by high-stakes negotiation and risk management off-screen. Fact 13. Rambo: First Blood Part 2. Rambo: First Blood Part 2, released in 1985, captivated audiences with high-stakes warfare and intense action sequences, yet it faced serious legal threats from multiple directions. A retired military officer claimed that the characterizations of antagonists closely mirrored his own career, asserting that specific plot elements misrepresented his life and actions. Simultaneously, a journalist alleged that portions of the film's depiction of POW rescues were drawn from her confidential research and unpublished notes, which had been shared with a producer during early development. The studio acted quickly to prevent litigation, negotiating confidential settlements with both the retired officer and the journalist. Additionally, certain international releases were edited to reduce political tension and avoid further disputes. Legal teams ensured that the settlements included strict non-disclosure clauses, preventing any public discussion of the claims. These measures allowed the film to reach audiences without controversy, preserving both commercial viability and the intended storytelling. Ultimately, the survival of Rambo: First Blood Part 2 hinged not just on Sylvester Stallone's performance or thrilling action, but on careful behind-the-scenes legal management, illustrating how blockbuster productions often navigate hidden dangers beyond the camera lens. Fact 14. Mission: Impossible 2. Mission: Impossible 2, released in 2000, delivered visually stunning stunts and high-octane action, yet its production sparked multiple legal challenges. A novelist claimed that the plot, including rogue agents, a deadly virus, and corporate conspiracy, closely resembled his previously submitted manuscript. The studio initially denied any access to his work, but an internal investigation revealed that a junior story editor had briefly been employed at the agency where the manuscript circulated, complicating matters. A biotech company asserted that certain scientific concepts in the film mirrored proprietary research. Legal counsel quickly assessed potential liability and pursued confidential negotiations, settling both disputes to prevent public exposure. Minor post-production edits adjusted terminology and plot points to mitigate resemblance, while strict non-disclosure agreements ensured that neither party could reveal the settlements. Through these actions, Mission: Impossible 2 avoided potentially costly litigation while maintaining its narrative and visual spectacle. The film's success demonstrates that even high-profile action blockbusters often rely on strategic legal intervention to navigate intellectual property and corporate sensitivities. Fact 15. Face Off. Face Off, released in 1997, enthralled audiences with its inventive plot and high-stakes tension, but legal disputes shadowed its production. A medical researcher alleged that the depiction of experimental face transplant procedures reflected confidential research he had developed under government contracts, claiming the film appropriated sensitive material without authorization. Additionally, an independent screenwriter contended that the central premise of enemies swapping identities originated in a script he had submitted years earlier. The studio faced potential litigation on both fronts, threatening to halt the release. To resolve the matters, confidential settlements were arranged with both parties, including non-disclosure agreements to prevent public discussion. Minor adjustments were made to technical dialogue and plot exposition, differentiating the final film from previous sources while preserving the dramatic tension and action sequences. By handling the disputes discreetly, Face Off successfully premiered, illustrating that even the most imaginative Hollywood productions rely on careful legal management behind the scenes to avoid lawsuits that could jeopardize their commercial and creative success. Bonus fact: The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight, released in 2008, became a landmark in action and superhero cinema, yet its production faced an unusual and highly confidential legal dispute. The controversy centered on Heath Ledger's portrayal of the Joker, which a family of a deceased performance artist claimed bore an uncanny resemblance to their relative's private stage persona. The artist's performances, documented in underground videos and personal diaries, included specific monologues, gestures, and visual styling that the family argued were replicated in Ledger's character. The claim extended beyond mere visual similarities. The family suggested that elements of the Joker's voice, cadence, and psychological demeanor were lifted from their relative's work, which had never been publicly released. They threatened legal action, asserting that the studio had effectively appropriated a private identity without consent. The potential for a high-profile lawsuit posed significant risks for both the studio and Ledger's posthumous reputation. Studio executives responded by negotiating a confidential settlement, reportedly including substantial compensation and binding non-disclosure agreements to prevent any public disclosure. Marketing materials were adjusted to emphasize Ledger's independent creative process, and minor stylistic details were subtly altered for international promotions. The dispute was effectively sealed, remaining hidden from public knowledge and preserving the film's critical and commercial success. This incident illustrates that even the most acclaimed and widely celebrated action films can harbor hidden legal battles. Behind the iconic performances and explosive set pieces, careful legal management ensured that The Dark Knight survived without public controversy, demonstrating the unseen forces shaping Hollywood blockbusters. Hollywood has long cultivated the illusion that blockbuster action films emerge purely from imagination, daring stunts, and creative brilliance. Yet, as we have seen, the reality is far more complex. Behind every high-octane chase and explosive set piece lies a network of legal negotiations, secret settlements, and carefully managed disputes. These unseen battles determine whether a film reaches audiences or becomes entangled in litigation, lost to history before anyone can see it. The films featured in this episode survived only because of discreet legal maneuvering, protection of confidential information, and behind-the-scenes interventions that the public will never witness. Writers, producers, and lawyers collaborated quietly to ensure the stories were told while safeguarding all involved from lawsuits that could have derailed entire productions. Countless other blockbusters remain hidden in files and agreements, their legal histories obscured by non-disclosure contracts and studio confidentiality. There are still stories that Hollywood hopes will never surface, waiting for the curious and persistent to uncover them. If you want more of these hidden truths, the secrets behind the action, and the stories that studios tried to bury, you already know the signal. The curtain can always be pulled back again, and the files will reveal even more of the unseen battles that shaped the movies we thought we knew.